I arrived at my parents' $7,500 30th anniversary dinner I paid for. My brother raised his glass and said, "To the ones who actually matter." My aunt laughed. "Don't let the help sit at the head table." I took one shrimp, smiled, and left. 30 minutes later, the venue manager handed them the bill. My payment voided. Then my phone buzzed with 76 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and 1 text from my mom. This was the last time I really tried. The last time I wanted to make them happy. I thought if I did everything right, if I made this day special, they'd finally see me. Not as the disappointment they treat me like. Not as the one-armed reminder of everything they'd rather ignore. Just as their son. Their 30th wedding anniversary was supposed to be a beautiful night. I paid $7,500 for the whole thing. A private dining room in one of the nicest restaurants in the city, personalized place cards, a string quartet, custom floral arrangements, and a 5-course meal. I even booked 2 tickets to Hawaii for them. First class. I wanted it to be unforgettable. And it was, but not for the reasons I intended. When I arrived, they barely noticed. My mom was busy telling one of her friends how, surprisingly good, her skin looked in this lighting. My dad gave me a quick glance and turned away. My brother raised his glass, looked right at me, and said, "To those who really matter." The people at the head table laughed like it was nothing. Then my aunt chimed in. "Don't let the servants sit up front." I stood there. Just stood there, holding my breath. I'd gotten used to the jokes, the comments, the way they never really adjusted to me coming back different. But that night hit different. Maybe because I'd given them everything I had, again, and it still wasn't enough. I took a fork from the table, looked down at it, smiled, and left. Didn't make a scene. Just walked out the door. I sat in my car for a while, watching the lights inside through the tinted windshield. I waited until they were halfway through the second course, then called the restaurant and canceled the payment. Politely. No drama. About 30 minutes later, the manager called me back. Told me my family was refusing to believe the bill hadn't been covered. They were starting to argue with the staff. I told him to go ahead and give them the total. Then my phone lit up. 76 missed calls. 3 voicemails. 1 text from my mom, "What have you done?" I turned off the phone. They weren't allowed to leave until 2 a.m. The restaurant held them until someone finally covered the bill. That someone was my dad's cousin, Mike, who only stepped in because he was sick of the scene. They didn't want anyone to know they couldn't afford it, but now everyone knew. The next morning, I called the airline and canceled the tickets to Hawaii. They hadn't even found out about them yet. I had planned to surprise them after dessert. Instead, I dropped the news in front of them, Uncle Mike, Aunt Renee, and whoever else was pretending they hadn't laughed last night. I said I didn't feel like giving anymore. Simple as that. My mom tried to act like I was going through something. My dad looked like he wanted to slap me. My brother said I needed help. Only Grandpa Joe said anything worth hearing. Told them they'd finally reaped what they'd been planting for years. They ignored him. He's 71, lives with them, and he's the only one who still talks to me like I'm not broken. I drove home after that. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. That was 2 weeks ago. And that was the night I stopped trying. After I walked out of that dinner and canceled the payment, something strange settled over me. It wasn't regret. It wasn't even relief. It was just silence. Like everything I'd ever tried to fix between us had finally gone dead. I'd always held on to some thread, some hope that maybe they'd come around. But after that night, the thread snapped. I didn't even hear the sound of it breaking. I just felt still for the first time. They didn't call the next morning. No apology. No questions. No explanation. And not even a single cheap excuse. I thought they might at least send one of those long texts, you know the kind, equal parts guilt trip and fake concern. But there was nothing. 3 days went by. Then a call from Grandpa Joe. He didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't make small talk. He just said, "They're falling apart. That's all." Then he added, "Told them they had it coming. You don't kick a man when he's down, and then expect him to pay for dinner." I asked him if they even understood what had happened. He said, "Nope. Still think you're just being dramatic." Apparently, my mom cried the entire car ride home. She was embarrassed. Not hurt, not ashamed of how they treated me. Just embarrassed. She had to explain to her friends why they were stuck at the restaurant until 2 a.m., trying to figure out who could put the bill on a credit card with enough room. My dad didn't say much that night, but the next morning, he blamed her for letting me get to this point. That's how he phrased it. As if I'd been spiraling out of control and not silently footing their bills for years. The most pathetic part? Uncle Mike bailed them out. He paid the full $7,500 without blinking. My mom practically begged him. I know because he sent me a message the next day. You should have handled that privately, Mason. Not in front of people. I didn't reply. This is the same guy who once told me I was lucky to only lose an arm and not my life. Every time I visited after the accident, he'd ask how it felt to be half mechanical now. After the fallout settled a little, I started getting feelers. My brother was first. He sent me a meme. Just some dumb picture of a cat knocking over a glass with "oops" in Comic Sans. Then, "You good?" That was it. I could almost hear the hesitation in the message. He was never subtle. He waited a couple days before asking if I had canceled the $1,000 transfer. I told him yes. No explanation. Just yes. He said nothing after that. Probably thought I'd cave. But I didn't. Next was my dad. He left a voicemail that sounded like he was being blackmailed into recording it. If you're still mad, fine. Just know this family isn't the same without you. That was his version of a peace offering. No mention of what actually happened. No apology. Just a casual reminder that I was supposed to keep playing my part. And then, as if this whole thing wasn't already surreal enough, I ran into one of my mom's bridge club friends while grocery shopping. I barely recognized her. She walked up to me, touched my arm, the real one, and said, "You really broke their hearts, you know. They didn't deserve that." She said it like she was handing me a casserole, like it was some kind of pity offering wrapped in judgment. I didn't say a word. Just walked past her. Bought my groceries. Drove home. But it hit me later. None of them think they've done anything wrong. In their heads, I'm still the problem. I'm the unstable one. The one who should be grateful. They still believe they've tolerated me. That's their version of love, tolerance. As if they had to adjust their whole world to accommodate their broken son. And for years, I let them believe that. I let myself believe it too. But I'm not broken. I'm done. They don't know it yet, but this wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't revenge. This was me finally stepping off the sinking ship they refused to admit was going down. And something tells me they're not going to like what comes next. The Hawaii trip was supposed to be the finale. A first-class, 5-star, week-long vacation to the island they dreamed about for decades. I had it all planned: flights, a private bungalow, spa reservations, even a private sunset dinner on the beach. It was going to be their big moment. I was going to reveal it with dessert, after the toasts. That's what made the whole thing even more ironic. Instead, I told them about the cancelled tickets the next day, when they were still trying to recover from the embarrassment of the restaurant. It happened in the living room of Uncle Mike's house. I knew they'd all be there: my parents, my brother, Aunt Renee, and Mike. They were trying to keep things calm, trying to avoid more public scenes. But they didn't expect me to show up at all. I walked in, dropped the printed flight itinerary on the coffee table, and said, "These were your tickets to Hawaii. I canceled them this morning." My mom's face went pale. She didn't say a word at first. My dad leaned back in the chair, like he was expecting a punch and bracing for it. Then she asked why. I told her the truth. I said it didn't make sense to keep giving to people who made it so clear I didn't belong at their table. Told them I wanted to do something kind, something big, and they spat on it the second I walked into that dinner. They could have pretended for one night. But they couldn't even manage that. Uncle Mike tried to cut in, started lecturing me about forgiveness and how families aren't perfect. I let him talk for about 10 seconds before I stood up. I said I didn't owe them a vacation, a dinner, or a single word more than I'd already given. And I wasn't going to keep pretending just to make them look good. That was when my dad exploded. Said I was acting like I was better than them. Like I was punishing them for something that happened years ago. He started listing everything they'd done for me growing up, like feeding your kid and sending him to school as some kind of medal-worthy act. My mom jumped in too, saying I'd always been sensitive, and now I was letting my bitterness ruin everything. I just looked at them and said, "I'm not bitter. I'm just done." They didn't get it. I could see it in their eyes. They were scrambling, not because they regretted what they'd done, but because the money was walking away. The provider. The fixer. The one who made the messes disappear. My brother didn't say a word. Just sat there scrolling through his phone like none of it involved him. I almost laughed. The only one who spoke up for me, again, was Grandpa Joe. He looked around the room and said, "You should all be ashamed. He gave more to this family with one arm than all of you combined with two." They ignored him. They always do. He was wasting his breath, but still, I appreciated it. I left after that. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't care if they called me ungrateful or cold after I left. I didn't slam the door. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked out and left them sitting in their own mess. They'd wanted to show off in front of their friends and relatives, to look perfect and loved and successful. But the mask cracked. And underneath, there was nothing they could hide behind. They didn't lose a vacation that day. They lost me. They just haven't accepted it yet. It took them exactly 2 weeks to fold. For 14 straight days, there was silence. No calls. No apologies. No passive-aggressive jabs from my brother or pity-laced texts from my mom. Just nothing. I should have felt peace, but what I felt was more like quiet before a storm. I knew my parents. I knew how long they could hold out before the mask slipped. And right on cue, that Thursday afternoon, I opened my front door to find Uncle Mike and Aunt Renee standing there like they were selling insurance. Mike looked pissed in that tight-jawed, quiet way he does when he's about to ask for something he doesn't want to owe you for. Renee had a fake smile on, the kind people wear at funerals when they're trying to convince you things aren't as bad as they look. They didn't ask to come in. Just stood there and started explaining. Renee led the conversation, of course. "They've been under more stress than you realize," she said, like she was revealing some tragic family secret. "They're not doing well. Financially." I didn't say anything. Just waited for the part one knew was coming. She said my mom had been taking out loans to stay afloat. Small ones, high interest. My dad had emptied out what was left of a retirement account they were supposed to hold onto for at least 5 more years. The house was close to defaulting. Apparently, they'd been juggling bills and putting on a front for months. The anniversary dinner? That was supposed to be the big act. Their way of showing the family, and me, that they were still doing fine. I asked why it mattered so much that I believed they were fine. That's when Uncle Mike finally spoke. "Because they were hoping you'd keep helping them," he said flatly. "If they looked put together, you wouldn't stop." There it was. Finally, out in the open. All the years of insults, cold shoulders, and mockery disguised as jokes, all while cashing the checks I sent without hesitation. They didn't see me as a person. I was a system. A backup plan. Mike looked away when he said it, like even he was embarrassed. Renee stepped in again, softer now, like I might melt if she just used the right words. "Mason, we're not asking for you to fix everything. Just consider being kinder. They're not bad people. They're just proud." Proud. That word again. They always used it like it was some noble flaw. But pride isn't noble when it's built on top of other people's sacrifices. I told them I understood. I really did. But I wasn't responsible for my parents' decisions. I wasn't going to reward years of disrespect just because the bottom finally dropped out. They didn't argue. That was the weirdest part. They just stood there, taking it in. Mike gave me a look that I couldn't read, somewhere between shame and resentment, and then they left. I watched their car pull away. No thank you. No see you soon. Just gone. That night, I imagined the conversation they'd have when they got back. My mom crying again, my dad pacing, blaming everyone but himself. My brother probably staying quiet, pretending he wasn't involved even though he'd taken more from me than anyone. And Grandpa Joe, sitting in his old chair, probably calling them out again, and being ignored again. But the power dynamic had shifted, and they all felt it. They knew now, I was done playing the role they wrote for me. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I wasn't the outsider trying to buy his way back into the circle. I wasn't interested in being part of a family that only loved me when it was convenient. And the best part? I didn't feel sorry for them. Not even a little. By the 3rd week, the silence had stopped feeling like a punishment and started feeling like a reward. My apartment was quiet. No phones ringing, no family drama seeping into my day, no fake apologies wrapped in manipulation. Just quiet. I hadn't felt that kind of peace in years. Then, Sunday morning, I got a knock on the door. It wasn't Mike. It wasn't Renee. It was Grandpa Joe. I froze when I saw him. He stood there gripping his cane, a manila folder tucked under one arm like he'd walked straight out of a courtroom. His breathing was heavy, like he'd walked farther than he should have. I stepped aside and let him in without saying a word. He sat down in my living room like it wasn't his first time here, even though it was. He didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't waste time. He dropped the folder on my coffee table. Inside was chaos. Bank statements, credit card bills, personal loan letters, a foreclosure notice, overdraft fees, collection warnings. I recognized my mother's handwriting on some of the payment plans. They'd stopped trying to hide it. Grandpa didn't say anything while I flipped through page after page of disaster. "They're broke," he finally said. "Not struggling. Not tight. Broke." He'd found it all himself. Said he'd gone looking after hearing them argue again, this time about whether to sell the car or the gold earrings my mom swore she'd never part with. My dad wanted to wait it out. My mom wanted to call me, but not to beg, just to make me understand. Which was her way of saying manipulate. I asked Grandpa why he brought it to me. He said, "I'm done watching them lie to you and then lie about you. I figured if anyone should know how deep the hole is, it's the one they built the ladder from." I stared at the foreclosure notice. They were months behind on the mortgage. The Hawaii trip would have kept them afloat for maybe another month. I would have delayed the inevitable. Covered the cracks in the wall without fixing the foundation. Again. Still, nothing surprised me in that folder. But something else did. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer it, but something about the timing felt off. I picked up. It was Melissa, my brother's girlfriend. She was panicked. Told me my brother had packed up and left. Took the cash my parents kept hidden in the safe, about $4,000 in emergency money, and vanished. Left a note saying he couldn't deal with the atmosphere anymore. No forwarding address. No explanation. Just gone. I didn't believe her at first. Thought maybe he was crashing at a friend's place, trying to prove some point. But then she said something that stuck with me. "I found a crumpled up paper in the trash. It was a note to you. Asking for money. Crossed out. Like he knew you wouldn't help this time. He didn't even try." That was the most unexpected part. For years, he never hesitated. Always came to me first, before our parents even knew there was a problem. I bailed him out of late rent, car payments, a gambling site phase he swore was just for fun. But now, he knew better. He didn't ask. He just took what was left and ran. And he left them behind. When I hung up, I just sat there. Thought about how the whole thing looked from the outside. My parents, sitting in a house they couldn't afford, scrambling to hide the truth. My brother, taking the last of their resources and disappearing. Uncle Mike and Aunt Renee backing off after realizing there was no more to squeeze. And Grandpa Joe, alone in that house with them, watching it all burn and not lifting a finger anymore. They built this. Every last one of them contributed to this mess. And for once, they couldn't spin it. Couldn't blame me. Couldn't rewrite the narrative into something where I was the ungrateful son. I'd taken away the illusion. That's what really hurt them. They weren't used to living without it. And something told me they wouldn't last long without it either. 3 weeks after the dinner, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I'd forgotten to delete. Parents' flight to Hawaii, 9 a.m. I stared at the notification for a while. Just stood there in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, watching the screen light up and then go dark again. It felt like something from a different life. Like I was watching a version of me I didn't recognize anymore, one who thought they deserved paradise after decades of emotional starvation. That morning, instead of heading to the airport, they were at a pawn shop, selling my dad's watch and my mom's wedding ring. I didn't have to imagine it. Grandpa Joe told me the night before. He was done too. He called and said, "They're digging a hole with spoons and wondering why they're not getting out." Then he added, "I'm leaving next week. Got an apartment lined up. They can yell at each other without me." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he was serious. They were unraveling, and I wasn't there to stop it this time. But the part that caught me completely off guard came the very next day. I was at work, buried in emails, when someone from the front desk called my extension. Said there was a woman in the lobby asking for me. Wouldn't give a last name. I walked out, and there she was. My mom. Alone. Her makeup was uneven, like she'd been crying or hadn't bothered to look in the mirror. She wore a sweatshirt I didn't recognize and sneakers. No purse. No wedding ring. She looked like someone else's mother. Someone who didn't know how she ended up here. I walked her outside. She asked if we could sit. So we did. On a concrete bench under the parking garage. She didn't talk at first. Just stared at the asphalt like she expected it to give her a script. Then she told me everything. The house had officially gone into foreclosure. They had 30 days to vacate. My dad was drinking more. He'd stopped trying to look for jobs months ago. She said she found credit card bills in his name that she didn't recognize. She was sleeping in the guest room. They barely spoke. Grandpa Joe had packed up and left the week before. My brother still hadn't come back, and the police had called her twice to ask questions. She didn't know where he was. She was scared he'd gotten in deeper than anyone thought. Then she said something I never expected to hear. "We need you, Mason. Just for a little while." I looked at her and didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. Not anger. Not vengeance. Just clarity. For years, I'd bent over backwards to be useful. Generous. Forgiving. I paid bills with one hand while pretending the jokes, the condescension, the absence of basic respect didn't hurt with the other. I swallowed everything, hoping one day they'd look at me and see more than what I'd lost. But I wasn't their son to them. I was their solution. And now that the solution had stepped away, everything had fallen apart. I told her, quietly and plainly, that I wouldn't be helping. Not now. Not later. That I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want to be part of their survival strategy anymore. I said she'd have to learn how to live without leaning on someone she never really stood beside. Her eyes went glassy, and she asked me one more thing. "Do you hate us?" I said no. "But I don't love them either, not in the way they think." I told her love requires presence. Effort. Some form of acknowledgement. And what they had given me was a contract of convenience, not connection. She nodded. I don't think she understood. I think she just didn't know what else to say. Then she stood up and left. And I haven't seen her since. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting immediately. It was my brother. He wrote, "Mason, I didn't ask because I knew the answer. You made it clear. I took the money. I'm not proud. But I needed a clean start. I'm working construction in Arizona. Nothing fancy. Just work. No more lies. No more messes. You don't owe me anything. But I hope maybe one day we can talk. On real terms. Dylan." No apology. No blame. But it was the most honest sentence he'd ever written to me. And that was the last piece of it. The house is gone. They moved in with my mom's cousin in Ohio, someone I haven't seen since I was 10. Mike and Renee stopped answering their calls after hearing they might be asked to co-sign a loan. Grandpa Joe lives 10 minutes away now, in a small apartment with a leaky faucet and a balcony view of the freeway. He says it's the best place he's ever lived. We get lunch twice a month. He always insists on paying. And me? I started volunteering at a trauma center, not because I want to be noble, but because it helps to talk to people who've lost something real and kept going. Who don't fake their way through grief or pain. Who don't treat wounds like inconveniences. People who don't just tolerate you when you come back damaged, but look you in the eye and say, "Still here? Me too." That's all I ever wanted. Not applause. Not admiration. Just to be seen. And now, finally I am. Not by them. But by myself. Mini update, a quiet Sunday. Last Sunday, I sat on Grandpa Joe's balcony with a coffee in one hand and a half-stale donut in the other. He doesn't keep much food around, says it's a waste for just one man. We watched cars hum by on the freeway below, either of us saying much. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Funny how quiet life gets when you stop begging people to hear you." I didn't reply. Just nodded and watched the sky change color over the rooftops. No calls came in that day. No emergencies. No guilt. Just quiet. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for it to end.